an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 1, Episode 8, The Strangled Heart. In this episode, it turns out that the beast was only possessing that poor dude who winds up getting killed brutally. And it also turns out that this woman who has been working with the dean, I believe she went by Eliza, actually is Jane. And, you know, I had wondered about that, but I just didn't think that that was what we were doing. So, I don't know what to make of that. I really don't. But it's a nice twist that I like. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many, many thanks to Mathy for commissioning this episode. This episode was sort of, it's an interesting thing. I can't decide whether or not this attraction that Eliot has to Mike was due to a spell or if he really cared about him. Like, it seems like he really did, and that's why killing him was so difficult. But the thing is, if you are under a spell, or if somebody is doing something to alter your mind, would that not wind up having the same sort of effect on you as being really in love, or at least believing that you were? I'm just a little bit like, I would like to get into that a little bit more and find out whether or not Eliot's feelings were coming from somewhere genuine and Mike was really the great guy that he liked. Or if the beast knew exactly the type of person that Eliot would go for. Or what, like, because, you know, in the end, Mike says that he has been basically like blacked out. Like he doesn't remember how anything went down. If that is true, was the way he behaved actually what he's like as a person? Because the beast it might not have been even a spell. It might have simply been that the beast was making him behave in a way, personality-wise, that would appeal to Eliot. You know, I just have a lot of questions in that arena about whether or not, any of this was actually real, because it could very easily be that the love was real and Eliot had to kill this person that he really cared about, and that is what fucks him up so bad. Or it could be that he has to kill somebody that he thought he was really in love with and has come to shortly thereafter realize it was not real. And that is what is so hard for him, is finally feeling this way about somebody after so long and discovering that it actually was a trick and that you weren't really in love with them and that somebody was able to manipulate you like that. Like, for me, that's I wouldn't say that's like a fear of mine particularly. It's not something that I really, but I feel like that would mess my mind up, knowing that something that had made me feel wonderful had just all been a lie, you know? So it could kind of go in a few directions here. And I'm just really, I'm very curious whether or not that's going to be dealt with or talked about at all, whether or not that really matters. Because I have said before, in the previous episode actually, that I wanted more from Eliot and Margo that made them seem like real people instead of cartoons. They really do feel a little bit like hedonism popping up, making these jokes, like going to orgies, talking about rare alcohols and whatever, wearing these outfits. Can we just talk real quick? I meant to say something about it last episode, but Margo in that like metallic pink bikini with the wide fishnet thing over it, girl, listen, that's just not fair. Nobody should look like that. It made me really, really jealous. That is if I looked like Margo, I would wear that kind of shit all the time. I could wear it like I look now, but it's just not the same. I'm sorry. For me, it's just not the same. Anyway, so I kind of like the idea that this like tragedy is going to lead to more character development for Eliot. Like I have the feeling that there's more for him to do, that he's a deeper person, and we just haven't gotten to see that. And a lot of that's probably because he has walls up, you know, like people who tend to act like this all the time. They, from experience, often are people who feel like they are not allowed to put their baggage on anyone else, that they are supposed to be the ones who help everyone else come out of their shells, help everybody else relax when they don't know how to. And when it comes time for they themselves to be vulnerable or honest, they don't know how to do it, or they don't trust that they're going to be able to do it because they feel in some ways like everyone around them is using them, and they don't want to put the demand on somebody else for the labor that they usually do for other people. Does that make sense? So anyway, I'm just really interested in what this could mean, and I hope that the show doesn't squander this opportunity to do something a little bit more interesting with Eliot. And also, if that happens, Margo's not here, right? She's off on her trip. When she comes back, she's going to find Eliot changed. And I would like to see what that looks like as well, because so much of their relationship is based around the fact that they both have very few inhibitions, that they both just love to party and have a good time, and that they are kind of morally gray. And is she the kind of friend that is going to be able to handle like him coming to her with this very intense tragedy? Like, he just had to kill somebody that he was in love with. Like, even though it had only been a short time, it's pretty clear that this was special to him. So that is a lot of trauma. That's like, you know, this is, we don't know what their relationship has been like before this. Have they ever had to deal with something like this between the two of them as friends? Like, I don't know. So is she going to be able to step up to the plate and help him? Or is she going to try and solve the problem by pouring liquor down his throat and then be upset when that's just not enough, you know? Anyway, so I just wanted to get that out there, because for me, that was like, I liked to see that Eliot is still a big part of this episode, but it's not what it had been. It seems like it's gonna be, because it starts off and he's making these like 2 cocktails that are really fancy, that he put in a lot of thought into, and then it turns out that Mike just wants a beer. And I really like this moment that when he asked for a beer, Eliot is like, it's not, I was kind of like, is he going to get his feelings hurt, or is he going to be like, oh God, maybe I don't like you? But instead he just says, you're lucky you're so pretty. And I really appreciated the fact that he was able to just roll with that and just be like, because I am definitely a person who, if I've put a lot of time and thought into creating a meal or a drink or something like that, and the person doesn't want it, I really do get my feelings hurt. And it's not even like I'm mad at them, because I know people can't help liking what they like, but it is a bummer, you know? And he handled it really well and was really sweet. And at this point, Alice and Quentin show up, and Quentin sees these 2 drinks sitting there and is like, how do you always have drinks waiting for us? And just grabs them from Eliot. Can we talk about Quentin's pants real quick, guys? Because they're both still wearing these like all white cream colored outfits. And he really, they need to put a cup on him or something. I don't care for this. It's very distracting. And there's another point at which he's like just standing there, and I was just like, this looks just, I don't care for it. I think part of it is the fact that there's no fly on the pants. So when there is, even if it's a woman wearing it, there's a kind of bulkiness to it, because that's just how the fabric lays. But because there's not here, I just kept on being like, I keep looking at your crotch. I don't want to be doing this. I hate this. And it becomes very clear very quickly to Eliot that the two of them hooked up. And it's a really strange moment of them like denying it and then going off and Quentin immediately kissing her like he's thinking we're just going to jump right back in bed again. And she is not into it. And I found that inexplicable. And so does he. And she says she can still smell the fox on him and that she can't help but wonder how much of their attraction to one another is kind of a result of that spell and doing that as foxes. And it's like a weird thing. Like in the end, it turns out that the attraction really is there for the two of them. But I can't lie. If she had decided that it was just because of the spell and that she didn't want anything more to do with him, I would have been glad about it. Even though that would have backfired and it would have turned into Quentin being a complete sad sack, even more so than usual, which would have been kind of excruciating. So, I don't know. Sometimes you just can't win. But she also, like, in this scene when they're outside, I don't know if this is on purpose or if it's because it's supposed to be, like, the result of all that they just went through over the past few days. But she has got some circles under her eyes and, like, this sort of, like, dead look to her face. And, again, I'm not really sure if that's supposed to be on purpose or if that is just a bad day for the actress. But yeah, so she sort of pulls away from Quentin. He looks really kind of freaked out. And she just says, like, I think we need to spend some time apart and find out what's real and what's fox. So yeah, he gets up and leaves and does this like kind of flicking thing with his fingers where it looks like he's going to reach out to her or he's going to like cast for a second, but then he doesn't. And I really wonder about that. Like there are moments with his hands where I'm just sort of like, are you thinking of trying to do something here, dude? Or is that just like a nervous tick of yours? So then we jump to a class where it's like, I think it's supposed to be astronomy or something. It's still on the Breakbills campus because this teacher is over here. What's her name? Sunderland. Professor Pearl Sunderland, says Amazon X-Ray. And fucking Penny just appears in front of the class in a rush of seawater. And it turns out that he was traveling and Professor Sunderland wants to know what he's doing to prevent his astral projection. And he says, I can't be afraid of my own powers. I need to figure out how to master this. And he says, do earthbound small potato shit first. And she asks if there's something else going on. And says, I know that you were close to Katie. And he says, not as close as you think, and then looks at her and says, if you're so worried about me, why don't you come travel with me? You teach me. And I know there's a few things I can teach you too. And he is right up in her face. And she doesn't pull away. She just says, I don't think that would be appropriate. And I mean, reminder, he's standing in front of her, soaking wet, no shirt on, very sultry. Penny is not my type at all because he's just too, like, affected. There's something about him that's really, get over yourself, you know what I'm saying? And it just rolls off him all the time. But I understand his appeal, don't get me wrong. And she definitely is, like, sort of tempted by it. And when she says, I don't think that's appropriate, he says, oh, I definitely agree. And then says, when do we leave? And she says, you're going to be late for your next class, and swallows really hard and has to blink a couple times. And when he walks away from her, she has to like take a couple of like deep breaths. And I have to say, I am such a fan of seeing women getting manipulated by attractive men. Like, it is something that I feel like is done poorly most of the time. And when it's done well like this, like, I don't need to be personally attracted to Penny to understand why he's appealing and what effect he might have on other women. And that's number one, because so many of the times that I've seen this done, it's with a dude that I don't get the appeal at all. And I'm just like supposed to trust that this woman would have this reaction. And I'm like, I don't buy it. Also, a lot of the women who are like in the role of being manipulated don't give as much of a sort of physical indicator that they are really like affected by this. And I love how intense her reaction is, because I have been there, man. And when there is somebody who, and it's not even necessarily somebody who's gonna sleep with you, it's that they know you want to sleep with them. They know that you know they would like to sleep with you, and they just kind of want to get it across that I would be open to doing this. I'm not going to initiate it, but if that's what you're interested in, I want you to know I am also interested. And it often happens when one of the two is in a relationship, or when it is a power imbalance like this, where it's a student and a teacher, or something where it's supposed to be like remain sort of unsaid. And that moment of her like taking a deep breath and sort of like having to go, okay, like, girl, yep, I know that feel, baby. It is the kind of thing that's sort of, it's hard to put into words what your brain does, because it's like it shuts down for a second and nothing that is like logical or sensible can fit anymore. Like, the door is shut and all that's happening is just this like physical reaction to that person. It is really inconvenient, to be honest. But yeah, so I enjoyed that moment a whole lot. I love how like irritated Penny is by the fact that she's not willing to like do this. And it's like so clear Penny's just propositioning her like this in reaction to her talking about Katie and bringing up Katie, you know, like he's not interested in this woman. He's trying to get a rebound, and she happens to be somebody who is in a spot where she could potentially help him both with getting his mind off of his broken heart and like perfecting this skill that he has that he's afraid of. So it makes sense, honestly, why he's doing this, and his frustration at not winning her over. I kind of feel like, Penny, if you tried a couple more times, I almost think that you would get through. I don't think that you should. I think that teacher and student relationships, no matter whether their ages are wildly out of concert or not, I don't think that those are ever really a good idea. And I also don't think that, I'm not even going to go so far as to say rebounds don't work. Rebounds definitely work. That's why people do them. Rebounds are 100% effective, like for many, many people. But I can't help but think it would, like at this time, because it's such an immediate follow-up, I can't help but think that this would just backfire for both of them. You know, he would be upset because he's not with Katie. Every time he's with this woman, he'll realize he's not with Katie, and she will start to sense that she's replacing somebody else and that he's not really that interested in her. Anyway, spent way too much time on that, but I just really like that scene. So we go to the dean's class, and Quentin is watching Alice and staring at Alice and just being himself that he is. And the dean tells them that their course loads right now are going to double. They're going to start alchemy, astronomy, botany, just to name a few. Study groups are mandatory. And they have already been split into groups. So what does Quentin do? He goes up to this girl. Now, first of all, I really like the fact, and I don't know if this was even noticeable to anybody, but the girl that he goes up to, her name is Gretchen. She is using a, like, arm crutch. I don't know what you call it when you put your whole arm into it, because it's like a brace almost, like, combined with a crutch. But I really like that little bit of representation, and I'm curious, like, I would assume that her hands work because of the way the crutch is fashioned, but because I had mentioned last episode, like, wondering if just being disabled precluded you entirely from doing magic, it's not the specific type of disability that I was referencing where it would be your hands, but I do like that there's somebody here who has a disability that is, like, you know, kind of not exactly answering my question right away, but sort of addressing it right away. That was kind of fun. And also, she's adorable with her hair in these little two buns with half her hair down, and I need to try this style. I need to do this. But yeah, he tells her that he found out she likes to sleep with a Mr. Spock body pillow. She doesn't really say anything, just kind of looks like, oh my God. And he says, I have a full collection of Leonard Nimoy's spoken word albums on vinyl. Are you interested? And she gives him this look like, am I interested? Really? Do you have to ask? And we cut to him going into the study group with Alice. Gretchen basically begged me to switch groups with her, and sorry. And he acts like this was all just a terrible... Like, Quentin, I am so thankful that Penny calls him out later. He's like, you don't want to take a risk and tell her that you're actually interested, so you're just going to act like a creepy fucking stalker, which is just as transparent, by the way, as just telling her. Like, and he tells her also that he's, like, wearing extra deodorant to cover the fox smell, and she says something like, yeah, it's strong. But yeah, it's just them and Penny, which is, like, the worst combination, and it smells like Axe body spray, and he looks at Quentin. I have to say, I still don't like how, like, inexplicably irritated with everybody Penny is all the time, but because I have grown to dislike Quentin so much, I am becoming Team Penny by accident. Because he's just so anti-Quentin that I can't help but be on his side. So anyway, so then we have Mike and Eliot, and they're in bed together, and this is when this, like, moth floats in. And I liked it because, you know, I had said something about, is Mike the beast? Like, is this... But it turns out that Mike is just being, like, possessed. So this moth landing on him is sort of representative of the beast taking him over for the moment. And this leads me to think that Mike isn't actually, like, completely controlled all the time, that some of what Quentin was experiencing, Eliot was experiencing with him was real, but I don't entirely know. And there's this weird thing where there's this rabbit that comes down the hallway, and apparently there's, like, a dagger hidden inside the rabbit. I am baffled by this. It's an awful scene, first of all, because he kills the rabbit, this adorable, sweet little fuzzy white bunny, and kills it so that you can, like, hear its bones crunching and hear it, like, give that little squeal. It's awful. And the dagger is hidden inside. So this is apparently how the beast snuck in this weapon, because this weapon is very particular. And he winds up using this to go after Quentin at, like, a later point. And this, like, attack is... Penny winds up, like, jumping him. It's actually a pretty sloppy attempt that I can't help but wonder if this is meant to just be a distraction or something. It doesn't feel well thought out, or, you know what I mean? I feel like he could have used this dagger to come and stab Quentin right then in the middle of the night while Quentin is asleep in his bed. He could have come at him immediately and been way more effective. But instead he attacked in the middle of the day in an open space where there's easy room to back away, where there's another person who can stand in for Quentin and you know, fight back. The whole thing just feels wrong. So I don't know what to think of that, but I will get to what goes on with that injury in a minute. Let's go to Julia, because she is in rehab, basically. And it turns out that she is treating her addiction to magic as an addiction, period. And I find this really interesting. This is something that was explored a little bit on Buffy. I don't know how many of you have watched up until the ends of that show. And I won't give too many spoilers away, but there is a sort of a thing that happens there where people can basically go get high on magic, and it is an actual addiction that they can sort of like crash from. And it's interesting because in those cases, it's like somebody from the outside has to sort of like zap them with magic. Like it's almost like there's a spell that makes you feel like you're doing a drug, versus what's happening here, where this is like an addiction that's more psychological instead of it being an actual physical reaction to something that's happening to you. Although Julia did say after doing certain spells that the feeling she got from it afterwards was really strong. And some of the other people that she has talked to about this say similar things about the feeling of doing magic and missing it. And so, I'm saying that it's a psychological reaction because I'm thinking about it in terms of something like the One Ring, where it's the power that really draws you. But there is also like a physiological reaction in their bodies, apparently, from doing magic. So I don't know, if she's entirely wrong about treating it the way that she's treating it. But here comes fucking Marina. And I can't believe that Marina was able to just walk in here. I have to think that this is some sort of magic because, it is when you're in some place that is like a rehab facility, and I'm not sure how strict this place specifically is, but even ones that aren't that strict, they don't just let folks walk on in whenever. And you usually have an approved list of visitors as well. So I don't know what this is, or if Marina's really even there, if she's just projecting somehow. But yeah, she says, I just came here to talk. And she wants to talk to Julia about whether or not she's serious about giving magic up. Because basically, she feels like Julia is inevitably going to come for her. And she just kind of wants to get out ahead of that. And I feel like the way that she comes upon Julia, she is such a mess. Julia's like, first of all, it looks like she hasn't slept in a couple days. She has her arm, only one arm in her cardigan and the other arm out, and the cardigan's just sort of flopped there. And she's all curled up and wearing like slippers and just like, it looks like she hasn't showered in a couple of days. And overall, I get the impression that Marina would not have believed Julia was really giving up magic until she came and saw what Julia looks like right now and where she is and what's happening. And it turns out Julia is writing all of these like amends letters or lists or whatever. And that is what she has been focusing on over the past few days. And Marina says, I'm sorry, Julia. I don't let in a lot of people. And the ones I do, it's got to be some kind of kindred spirit thing happening. I actually like you. And Julia is just sort of looking off into the distance and is just like, what the fuck ever. And she says, This isn't what I wanted. I actually wanted you to be on my team. Are you really serious about giving it up? And Julia nods, and Marina is just like, all right, I guess if that's what you want. And we don't have to be like total, like mortal enemies. If you're going to give it up, then we can just leave it. But make sure that you really, really do give it up and leave me alone. Because if you want to start this shit back up again, I absolutely will kill everybody that you care about. And as she walks away, Julia cannot help but just say, bitch, under her breath. To which Marina says, yeah, okay, I'm a bitch. So what? You're weak. Why are you apologizing to him? He's the one who should be in here, not you. And I don't entirely agree, but I also don't entirely disagree. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just, the way that Quentin acted, the way that he has been, it's just really making me, I just feel like I have so much more sympathy for Julia than I might have a couple of years ago. And it's not even like I love her storyline. I don't find it that interesting to watch. It's simply that we, as viewers, I think all have a sort of weird suspicion, if we are people who are really into fantasy, right, as a genre, I think a lot of us have a low-key suspicion that we could probably do magic and just somebody is not, like, teaching us how to do it. Or that it's been hidden from us somehow, but other people somewhere do know. There is a hope, like a fantasy desire sort of thing, that we can't help but sort of wonder. And so there is this low-key sympathy that I have for her, that her friend, somebody who had been like her best friend, is off doing the exact thing that she wants more than anything. And that, I mean, even when it doesn't have to do with something as outrageous as magic, that's already a tough thing. Even if you just want to get into a certain profession and it turns out that your friend like stumbled into it, turns out to be amazing at it, and gets accepted to something that you were like, you know, didn't even know was a possibility for you. That's already bad enough. But then to top it off with just like, well, maybe you should have thought about it when you treated me the way you did, adds just a whole other level of like, go fuck yourself, you know? So anyway, I'm kind of enjoying what's going on with her in its way, even though I completely would understand if people were sick and tired of Julia. Like, I get it. I really do get it. But for me, there's something about her, I don't know, that I find really sort of compelling. And it's weird because I don't think I even really like her. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't really like her as a person. It's just, there's something about the situation. But anyway, so she winds up like sort of invading a like group that is supposed to be like a 12-step group. And she gets really aggressive about the fact the guy is named Richard, who's teaching the class. She gets really aggressive about the fact that Richard is talking about God or recommending God as like a higher power thing. This is really, I actually appreciated this, except in the context of this show, it feels strange. But in terms of like overall dealing with addiction, this is something so many people run up against, is the 12 steps are often people's suggestion to those who are trying to overcome something. And I really believe that the 12 steps do work in some ways because you are simply dealing with trauma. It's almost like a substitute for going to therapy. And if there are people who are just not willing to go to therapy, the 12 steps are about talking about things that happen to you and things that you have done to others and really like investigating yourself and becoming a little bit more self-aware. So that's part of what I think is so useful about it. But it is like often about a higher power, and that usually means God. And the way that the Big Book and 12 Steps are written, it's a very Christian like idea of God. And a lot of folks, that just doesn't connect with them, and they find that really hard to get past. And I totally get that, you know? So this like conversation that she has is actually kind of legit, but the way that they frame it is her sort of being like kind of a dick about it. Like the way that she comes in and she's just like, sauntering up and like, well, you're just replacing one addiction with another and it's a crutch. And the actual dialogue itself isn't the problem. It's the way that she has chosen to play the dialogue. She makes herself sound petulant and childish rather than somebody who is really just kind of like, this doesn't feel right to me. I feel like, and I think that the show wants us to feel like she's just lashing out because she doesn't understand. But it's frustrating because the questions she's asking are legitimate in my eyes. It's just that she has such a shit attitude about it that it really feels like she's being super childish. So I just didn't really love the way that she like comes into this, especially because there's a group of people who are all engaged with Richard when she does this. It would be one thing if she was in a one-on-one session and she reacted this way because he's trying to push this on her. But she's stepping into a space where other people are trying to get help and decides to sort of completely derail it. And I just felt like that was incredibly self-centered. But I think that there wasn't really another way to like get her and Richard interacting unless he was going to be her actual counselor or whatever, and they weren't going to do that. I don't know. I feel like just having this like open meeting that she wanders into was like what the writers felt was the most natural way for her to get involved in this conversation in the first place. She wasn't going to do it because she believed it would help. She would get involved because she wanted to contradict him, which, I mean, I guess. So she says we need to accept the world for what it actually is. And he's like, how about we can make it better? And she says, give a man hope and a nickel, and you've got a nickel. I mean, what does that even mean? Like, that doesn't mean anything. It's just, it's one of those like trite little cynicisms that you think you're really being deep somehow or really saying something. And it's just nothing. Like, I don't know what, but yeah, this like, it turns out later that this dude actually was involved in magic himself. Like, he knows where she's coming from. And he can like kind of feel it coming off her. And he says, what safe house were you in? And she's immediately like, what? And he says he recognized your ink. You see it more often than you'd think in a place like this. He says that he himself was classically trained at break bills, to which she's like, mm-hmm. And then tells her that, he decided to go back out into the world and just get a regular job. That, he says, you act like it's a terrible vice that you need to get clean of. But it's not. It's not heroin. It's a gift. And I'm not the guy outside of the YMCA yelling at people to repent. What we call magic is a set of tools left over from creation. The power to bend reality, to make and unmake. And again, won't God be pissed we touched his tools without asking? Girl, why are you like this? So he basically wraps it up with, the tools were left on purpose for us to find. And there is something that I think that you should check out. And he pulls out this spell and gives it to her. And she goes and does this spell without a lot of investigation into what it is. And this is my problem. Julia, what are you doing? Just trying spells that some random hands to you? Like, for real, though, what are you doing? He could be anybody. He could work for Marina. You don't know what the fuck. Just the idea of just doing something like that is so dangerous without... And she even says to him later that it felt dangerous. Girl, because you didn't know what it was. Like, the whole thing is just so... So she does this spell. It doesn't seem to do anything. She's about to step out of the circle, and then all of a sudden, she gets lifted up into the air on her back. And it's actually a really cool effect. She is hanging there, exposed and vulnerable in this way that is very alarming if you are not, like, comfortable with whatever's doing this to you. And she has a very worried look on her face at first. But it seems to sort of calm down. She seems to relax a little bit, like, into it after a moment. And when she goes to him afterwards and is like, what the fuck was that? He says, I am a good magician. We're trying to make this world a better place. What I gave you was really more of a prayer. You don't have to treat magic like it's a drug. You don't have to turn tricks for it. You don't have to buy and sell it. You don't have to do... He says, you can choose how you want to handle it. And she gets pretty emotional about it. It's almost like he wanted to use the spell to prove to her that there is something else out there. But I don't know that he really succeeded in that or not. You know, like, I don't know. I don't know if this sank in the way that he wants it to. But he says, she says, if I give you something, you think you can get it into break bills for me. So I'm guessing that this is probably like her amends letter. But that is the end of her interaction with him, is her asking that question. And can I just say, I don't trust Richard at all, and I don't know why. I don't, like, every basically white dude that I see, I'm like, is this the Beast? Because they all look the fucking same to me. Can I be honest? He and Mike and Pete all look so similar. I really, they're just like ruggedly handsome, sandy-haired, medium build type dudes. I just keep thinking that they could all... Is that the point? Is that what the show's trying to do? Is be like, we're going to show you a generic white dude in a suit with medium build, and then we're going to put a bunch of generic white dudes with medium builds into other areas of the show so that your paranoia is constantly on high. Maybe that's like the whole point, I don't know. But I can't with this dude right now. Like, and I just don't. Oh, and Jessie says she was pretty aggressive. It would have made more sense if Richard would have approached her first. Yeah, I feel like that would have been... Yeah, the way that they just have her, like, wander into it, it just felt so contrived. I don't know. I'm just seeing Hugabug. The way you just described it made me equate them to Bender from Futurama. Oh, I think talking about Margo and Eliot, which, yeah. So anyway... I'm going to go back a little bit. We have the dean getting the gloves pulled off of his hands after being in those, like, contraptions for a minute. And he can still move his hands, but he can't cast the way that he was. It's not working, immediately. And Professor Lipson is telling him that there are physical therapy exercises and things that we can do to help you along. And he's like, I taught myself magic when I was 4 with no help or instruction from anyone, and I can do that shit all over again. It's fine. To which I'm like, you don't need, like, physical therapy isn't a terrible thing. I don't understand why you can't just, like, accept help. Like, it's a weird reaction in my mind to handle things this way. But I guess, okay. So we have this, like, little thing with Eliot and Quentin where he says that he has nothing to wear because he is not emotionally prepared for Mike to see him in repeat outfits. And he holds up a couple of things for Quentin to to opine on. And Quentin is no help whatsoever. And Eliot is absolutely freaking out. And later on, we cut to them doing what looks like a botany project. And they're in the middle of, discussing all of this when Mike busts into the clearing. I think that Alice walks away to get something. And so it's just the two of them initially when this whole thing pops off. So this is when Penny says, could you not for 1 second give her the googly eyes? And Quentin is like, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you even mean? And Penny is just like, hey, you know what? Break Bill's definitely, he says Break Bill's south, which I think is like the South Pole. He says, it didn't have a lot of things, but it had windows. So if you think I didn't see y'all's extracurricular activities, you'd be very mistaken, foxes. That's right. This is what prompts Alice to leave. She cannot handle this conversation. And he says, this is when he says to Quentin, you do see what you're doing wrong, though, right? You act like a stalker and then go out of your way to deny you're interested. Grow a pair, or she'll find someone who already did. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. There's so many dudes that really like, I feel like the thing that holds them back is just that they don't have the spine to really actually make a real move. They just sort of wait around on the sidelines for the girl to declare herself interested. And it's not even that the girl is necessarily not interested and is just sort of trying to like be nice and spare his feelings. It's that she's sort of waiting to see how intensely interested he actually is. Because if he isn't even interested enough to ask you out and make an effort, then why waste your own time? You know, it's really, that's what it comes down to. It's like, well, how much do you actually want this? If it's not even enough, then why do I care? So thank you, Penny. Just so many men could use this advice. They really, really could. So yeah, they're in the middle of this. And this is when Mike comes down and comes at them. And, oh, you know what? I thought that he attacks them during the day when they're in the middle of this project, but it's way later on by then. My bad. So it is the middle of the night. But yeah, he's weird and he's like, I got turned around. Can you tell me which way the cottage is? And then he comes for Quentin. Quentin like kind of matrixes backwards. Penny fights him and it looks like he's going to get the better of him, but he manages to stab Penny before Quentin uses some magic to like propel him. And his eyes glow for a second. So Quentin can see that this dude isn't quite in his right mind. And the next moment we are in the hospital and Penny is in surgery and everybody is sort of freaking out. And Eliot is here as well because they know that he knows that Mike is the one that did this. So yeah, they found him trying to open a portal near the Welters Stadium. And Eliot is just like, immediately, where are they taking him? What are they doing to him? And it turns out that they have like a dedicated space that they keep somebody who is this dangerous. Because this guy, they don't know what's up with him. Is he possessed? Is he acting of his own free will and pretending to be possessed? Like, whatever the case, he's a danger to people. And this dude is saying that he had been on like the other side of the country, basically, and just woke up and was here, and that he doesn't remember anything that happened. Meanwhile, the dean is talking about how this is a clean room. It was not intended for this purpose, but it will do. Where is the weapon that you used? And Mike is like, I don't know. He asks why you were targeting them. And he says, I was in Brooklyn, then I was here. I don't know. Okay, so not the other side of the country. If we're assuming that Breakbills is in New England, which I think we are kind of. But yeah, he tries to get up to explain, but he's like chained to the floor. His hands are manacled together. And he says, you know me, right? I was your student for 3 years. You know that I couldn't. And the dean says, I know you did. And the dean comes out at this moment when Quentin and Eliot come running up, demanding information, demanding to know what they're going to do with him because they're apparently just leaving him in that room. And the dean says that there is a circuit court system that is sending a representative that deals with magical crimes, which oh, dang, really? I want to know all about this. Please and thank you. It's like kind of a shame that things go down the way that they do, because I'm not sure if that is going to make it so that this representative doesn't wind up showing up. Or is the representative supposed to be Eliza? Is that her? Maybe that's supposed to be who she is, as the representative. If she is, then that sucks, because I want to see what this organization works like, and instead we just see her. And I know her, and I don't know who she's working for really, or how that all goes. But yeah, he says they have facilities, and the exact punishment depends on whether Penny lives or dies. And Eliot says this reeks of mind control. And saying that tips Quentin off to recognizing that when his eyes changed, that was really significant. So we find out that, first of all, Eliot goes and talks to him and asks if you were blacked out when we first met. And we don't really get a response from Mike about this. He just sort of looks at him. He says, I don't remember. All the stuff they're saying I did, I don't remember. And I'm assuming at least that Mike is actually gay, that there isn't that he's not a straight guy who just got mentally controlled into being in this relationship. But I don't even know, it's essentially like Mike has been raped either way, because he was mind controlled into this relationship. But yeah, poor Eliot, he just looks so hurt by the idea that this guy doesn't remember anything of this, which meant so much to him. So jumping ahead, it turns out that this wound is festering and cursed somehow, and they start to see vines growing out of Penny's skin. It is the number one creepiest thing in the entire world. Can we talk about this? This is horrifying. This is horrifying. I hate it so much. So these vines are growing out, and it's actually something that Quentin remembers, and that also now Alice is aware because she read them for research. And Jane, who was alone in Fillory for the very first time, was stabbed by the same weapon, and they managed to use a doll that was like a voodoo doll to substitute for her and get the curse from this wound to jump into the doll instead and accept her as the sacrifice instead. So mistakenly, Quentin is focusing on the fact that that this was a doll that they used, and not on what the significance of the doll was. Because it turns out they try and do the voodoo thing and use that, and it doesn't change anything for Penny. And when he finally speaks to, what's her name? Eliza, aka Jane. When he finally speaks to her, she reminds him that the thing isn't the doll, it's the fact that the doll was incredibly meaningful to Jane, that it was something that was given to her by her grandmother, and that it was so valuable that was really what caused this redirection of the spell to work, rather than it being a representation of her. So they have to figure out what his most valuable possession is. And Alice is really misunderstanding Penny and buys into this, I don't give a shit about anything kind of show that Penny is putting on, while Quentin really understands a lot better what actually Penny is feeling. Because Penny has chosen to sort of step up and correct Quentin about a few things in such a way that Quentin is aware Penny has the capability to feel these things too, and to know how to handle them better than him, and has more experience and all of this. So when he finally comes across a picture of Katie, Alice tries to be he doesn't even care that she's gone. And you're projecting what you feel about being sentimental onto him. And he's like, no, everybody is sentimental. She tries to say that maybe it's the drugs because they are the only thing that keeps the voices at bay for him. And of course that would be very precious to him, but he doesn't buy that. And he says they're fungible. So she says, you're fungible, which I really enjoyed. And then when they find this picture, she sort of argues with him, but they decide to go ahead and try it anyway, because at this point, he's about to get his heart strangled out by this damn thing. These vines crawling up his body. So they burn it next to the bed, and the vines indeed begin to retract. And Alice reaches over and touches his hand in a way that's sort of, to me, signifying that, like, not only, okay, you were right, but also, to me, is sort of like acknowledging that sometimes people don't want to admit that they really care about a person. And it makes them uncomfortable. And I'm like, the fact that you saw through that makes me feel a little less ridiculous, because I kind of felt like Penny was judging us. And now I'm realizing he has the same feelings that we do for each other for Katie, even though he wants to hide that. So anyway, I have to finish this up. Let's jump ahead to the confrontation between the Beast and Eliza. I'm realizing now so much of why I thought that potentially Eliza was Jane is the costuming. They make sure to put Eliza in one of those sort of capelet things, the same as what Jane wears whenever he winds up in Fillory. And that just, I don't even think I even like consciously made that connection. It was just a thing that was happening. But yeah, she like meets up with him and with Mike, but knows that it's the Beast in there, and says, you know, she says, you're not going to be able to hide in Fillory forever. And he says, you know, there's always a door when you need one. You forced my hand. I wish it could be any other way. I picked the Virgo blade especially for you, Jane. A little twinge of nostalgia. And she starts to get too sort of, what's the word I want? Arrogant about the whole thing, and says, I can walk out of here anytime I like. If you can leave, what are you waiting for? And he says, oh, I was waiting for you. And then he stands up and bashes her in the head with this. Now, guys, can we just talk about how bad this like clean room is? That he can move around this freely, and like he doesn't need magic to actually overpower her like this? That sucks. This is poorly done. And he climbs on top of her and basically like breaks her head. The dean tries to keep him from getting out, and he does some spell in retaliation, and the dean falls down and there's blood pouring out of his nose. And he is about to stomp on the dean's head, and then here comes Eliot, and he does this like sort of laser thing and draws it across, and it's like it snaps his neck. And Mike falls to the floor, and poor Eliot looks like he's going to throw up. And when we cut to a little bit further on, because Eliot just kind of has a breakdown at this point, Quentin is coming into the dean's office, and Quentin just looks like a mess as well. And he asks, what do we do? And the dean is like, I don't know. And he's like, what the fuck do you mean you don't know? He expects him to have answers, to which the dean is just like, guy, we're figuring this out. We don't know what's happening. She, Eliza, was the only one that could tell us anything, and now she's gone. There aren't answers. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know anything. And he goes back to his dorm, and Alice is there, and they kiss, and that's the wrap of the episode, is them being together, which again, I really don't care about, so it's fine. But yeah, so there were some parts of this episode that I didn't really love, but then there were some things that I really liked. I don't love how Eliza got how he got the drop on her. It feels really cheap, but at the same time, what's going on with Eliot is super, super interesting. And I'm excited to see him get to act something other than like casual disdain and amusement. Like this moment, he really got to show some chops, you know, and I liked it. So I thought he was really good. So yeah, anyway, thank you very much to Mathy for commissioning this episode. Very much appreciate it. And I believe that there's going to be another one next week. Let me just double check that. Yep, we do. We have another one next week on Tuesday the 16th. And then I believe there is one for Friday. Am I wrong about that? Oh yeah, there's not one for Friday. I believe that then after that there's another wait. But if you are interested in commissioning, you can go to unspoiled.com/shop, I think is where you can go. And I am excited to be doing the show. I'm really starting to get into it. It took me a little bit, which people had warned me it might. But I'm glad I trusted y'all. So thank you. And I will be seeing you all again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.